So on this channel, we've often spoken about people who do not get the due amount of time for the crime they've committed. We've seen this a lot, especially with female rapist teachers. We've seen it all over the place, but this case, I think, really is, I'm not going to say takes the cake in terms of ridiculousness, but we really are getting close to what I think is a point of no return. I'm not saying that to fearmonger anyone, but I'm alarmed. So a case came to my attention, not because it's a new case, it's actually old by almost a decade, but it's a case that revolves around violence against a child, which, as we well know, is what I think the death penalty is for. But anyway, so it said that the White House is looking into decade early release of Ronald Exantis. Now, we're going to talk about exactly what Ronald Exantis did. However, I will say, if you have a sentence where you can get out a decade early, first of all, that has to be a long sentence, at least 10 years, right? If you're out a decade early. But the concept of having at least 10 years and being let out that early, initially I had stupid faith in humanity saying, oh, this person being let out a decade early, maybe they've found that he wasn't guilty. Maybe something happened that makes sense and justifies being out of prison. Do you think that's how things panned out? The White House has confirmed an investigation into the release of Ronald Exantis, a man who was released from prison 13 years early after stabbing an entire Kentucky family and killing their 6-year-old son, Logan Tipton. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt made the announcement on X just after 8 a.m. Saturday. It's wholly unacceptable for a child killer to walk free after just several years in prison, Secretary Leavitt said on X. My first reaction was, finally. People are finally finding out about this. 10 years ago, we tried to get the word out, but social media was not what it is now, Heather Tipton, Logan's mother, said. So even before going into the details of this case, it really is important to remember that the person being let out is a child killer. Now, all the details you will find out make it significantly worse, but regardless, just the fact that this person is a child killer makes it inconceivable to me why you would let them out early. Honestly, any killer being let out early is insane to me. The only reason you should be let out early is for, in my opinion, nonviolent crime, and then also showing reformed behavior. There are so many things that go into that, but just being let out, surely there are other people who should be let out early because they did not commit a violent crime and showed that they changed their behaviors, blah, 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 as opposed to someone who murdered a child under the guise of insanity. And we'll get to the insanity part, but really, this is who we're deciding to place our bets on. This is a person who should be back in society ASAP. Investigators say that in 2015, Exantis entered the Tipton household through an unlocked door. He then committed a series of stabbings, injuring the 6-year-old's father and 2 sisters. It's been 10 years since Coral Tipton and her siblings say they watched Exantis kill their 6-year-old brother, Logan Tipton. He did it in front of me, he did it in front of my siblings, and being an older sister who has the obligation anyway to protect her younger siblings, it's just, he messed us up, Coral said. Exantis was convicted of the stabbings of the Tipton's father, Dean, and 2 of his sisters. However, he was found not guilty by reason of insanity for the death of 6-year-old Logan. Exantis was sentenced to 20 years in prison, the total of 2 concurrent 10-year sentences for each assault in the stabbing series. The Kentucky Supreme Court upheld his conviction in 2020, while a state board denied him parole in 2021 and deferred it for 2 years in 2023. Just for context, when we talk about killing a child here, what Exantis did is he stabbed a 6-year-old who was sleeping in the head numerous times, waking up the entire family, and then, as we read, the sisters and the parents basically watched him continue murdering this sleeping little boy. Let me give you a tiny bit more information about the crime, not because I think these gruesome details are, gossipy details. They're details to contextualize who is getting back into society. Who are we releasing exactly? When I got to the top of the stairs, he attacked me with a knife, Logan's father, Dean Tipton, told WKYT. He stood up with me on top of him, just stood up and threw me 10 to 15 feet across the room and went after my daughter, he told KKTB. He stabbed me in the back and then stomped on my head, Logan's sister Dakota Tipton told the outlet. And I remember waking up across the room, not where I was at, and I looked and he was killing Logan and Logan was screaming. He didn't just kill my son, Heather Tipton, Logan's mother, said during Exanta's sentencing hearing per LEX 18. He killed every member of my family. Every single one of us and every person that's sitting here today is a completely different person than they were when they went to bed December 6th. So this is who they were releasing from prison. And I think that this is a really important thing to keep in mind because realistically, you're not releasing someone who has any reason to be trusted. You're not releasing someone who has shown that they've changed as far as we know. And I don't even know how you demonstrate having changed after murdering a child that brutally, on top of trying to allegedly at least murder the rest of the family. That's why I think he was attacking them, right? So you have traumatized all of them. You have taken away their child, and for some reason, they're deciding to let you out. Does someone understand the math going on here? Because I don't. This October, Exantis was released from prison 13 years before his sentence was set to expire. The Kentucky Department of Corrections says Exantis was approved to serve his mandatory reentry supervision in Florida in accordance with the Interstate Compact for Adult Offender Supervision, per KRS 439561. As passed by lawmakers, KRS 439510 prohibits offenders' specific supervision conditions, level, and interactions with a parole officer from being released. The Department of Corrections policies pertaining to probation and parole supervision can be found here. The DOC told WKYT Exantis will remain under probation and parole supervision until the expiration of a sentence, which is listed as ending in June 2026. Needless to say, June 2026 is around the corner, so to say that like, oh, things are going to last until then, it's like, that's not a very long time. But putting aside even just that, by June 2026, he won't need to be under any probation and parole supervision is crazy. I don't think this person should be outside of prison. End of. Point blank. At the same time, if we are going to go down this hellscape route of, yes, let's just let the murderers out, then the very least you could do is have this person be extremely highly supervised. Again, I don't think that's the solution. I don't think this person should be let out in the first place, especially if you pleaded insanity in terms of why you killed a child. Shouldn't you at least be in a mental institution? I don't understand how any of this works. It doesn't make sense to me logically, and I am at a loss overall. It goes on to say the Kentucky Justice Cabinet released the following statement about Exantis' release. The parole board did not release Ronald Exantis on parole. Exantis was reviewed for parole on September 30th, 2025, as required by state law. The parole board issued a decision that Exantis stay in prison for the remainder of his sentence. Despite this decision, a provision in Kentucky law required the Department of Corrections to release the inmate on mandatory reentry supervision. Exantis' former attorney, Hoffler, says Exantis called her after he was released. Hoffler says she was initially shocked he was let out because it was such a contentious case, but it didn't really surprise me. If anyone deserved to get out early, it was Ron. He had accomplished so much while in prison, Hoffler said. Hoffler says Exantis suffered from late-onset schizophrenia and became a mental health advocate in prison. The horrible thing about this is Ron did not intend to do any of this, and Ron was insane when it happened, but yet Logan is still dead, and those children are still traumatized, and they will be until the day they die, Hoffler said. The Tipton family is continuing their fight for justice. Since Exantis' release, they say they've heard from lawmakers in Frankfort. So personally, I'm very curious about the work that Exantis supposedly did in prison, because becoming a mental health advocate is good, I suppose. I don't know if I'd be taking many tips from a murderer. I understand mental health is a thing. I understand mental illness is a thing. But they do not negate the final product of what happened. And that final conclusion was a child is dead because of you. And you tried stabbing other people. You broke into a house. I mean, I don't really understand how we're trying to posit this as this poor killer, right? If there are mental health problems, which I'm not even sure there are, but anyway, if there are mental health problems there, he deserves to have them taken care of, but he still does not deserve to be free because he did commit the crime. And as we've said a million times before, mental health, mental illnesses, they're not your fault, but they are your responsibility. The fact that the reception of this crime as of today is to be like, oh, poor mentally ill guy, let's let a child murderer out, is very scary, because you understand that this is opening the door for a lot of people to claim mental illness, mental health problems, whatever, quote, under the guise of quote unquote insanity, in order to just pull whatever. Because in a normal world, this crime would be considered so egregious. The killing of a little boy and then the attempted killing of the rest of his family because he did stab them, that would not even be a debate. It would not even be a question of, can he leave prison? Can he be let out early? It would just not be considered because it's delusional. And I don't know how you don't think this person is a massive flight risk. If he was quote unquote insane then, what has changed? And if things have changed, at least tell the public, but you can't rely on the public to just quote unquote trust me, bro, because what? Why would I trust you? Clearly your priorities are not the safety of the general people in the vicinity of this man, first of all. Second of all, we also have to consider the family that is left, right? The family that has survived their little son. I would be scared if I were them, because what's to tell me that this man is not going to reappear at their house and finish the job he already started a decade ago? Overall, none of this lines up for me, and I don't know if I'm missing something. There needs to be something put in place that if people are violent and they say they're insane and they're deemed insane, then there's got to be a place for these people. They cannot be walking amongst us. The family is making an effort to push legislation they call Logan's Law. My brother will never be forgotten, Coral says. So it's even crazy to me that we're having this conversation because, again, if someone is a massive homicidal flight risk, I really don't understand how it is that you feel comfortable letting them back out into society. And this also goes for if he made massive steps. Like, let's say in prison, he completely changed, he's on medication, whatever the case may be, his status is no longer what it was. Still then, you should not be too comfortable letting him out because you don't know. If he actually is insane, which again is something I question because it seems like a convenient route, right? It's working for him anyway. But if he is effectively insane, was that quote unquote cured by medication? How was that taken care of? Like, what did you do to make him a different person now than he was back then? And why should I believe you? And when I say I'm speaking, if I were the family, I would ask that. As a general concerned human being on planet Earth that doesn't want murderers running about, I'm also asking you that. But that would be my first question from them. I hope they have these answers because I can't imagine what kind of state they're in to not only see a killer walk free, but to potentially feel in danger for their own lives because, oh yeah, a killer is walking free. I don't know when we collectively decided to become so soft on people who do not deserve softness and gentle care, okay? Softness and gentle care goes to the people who were not murdering children. I understand empathy, I understand compassion, but at some point it will become suicidal, and that's what this is. This is suicidal empathy because you're letting a killer out, knowing he's a killer, knowing he's insane, and then when he kills someone else, what are we gonna say? What's the excuse then? What's the story? The story is gonna be that you let out a killer and you facilitated all of this happening. In terms of the response to this, like I said, I would be in a different dimension if I were his family. So in regards to the family, it says, father of slain 6-year-old issues ominous threat to son's killer who was freed early after serving just 8 years. Let's remember, he had a decade left, okay? So this is like half of the time, not even. So it gives us some information we already know about. I'm not going to repeat all of that. Quick thing, also this article that discusses the dad's ominous message to the killer. Exantis was a former dialysis nurse. I would like to know what all went down there because did he become insane suddenly? Did any people at the dialysis clinic or wherever it is he was working die under weird conditions? Because now I'm starting to work backwards and say, did he just go quote unquote insane randomly? What happened? Why could he even keep a normal job, a regular job, if he was insane? You see how there are parts here that seem like they don't exactly add up? I would like explanations for that as well. Tipton expressed outrage over the release and vowed to avenge his son's killing if he ever sees Exantis again. He told Dakota that he was going to kill every one of us, so now I've got to be on extra guard to protect my kids because I will not lose another one, Tipton told local Fox 56. I've had my talks with God because I'm not afraid to tell you all. I told the court if I ever cross paths with him, I will kill the man. I will kill him where he stands, he told WKYT. Logan's mother expressed her own disbelief that the man who killed her son while he slept is now a free man less than a decade later. It's infuriating that a 6-year-old was killed sleeping in his bed and someone literally only did 10 years in prison And he didn't even do the time for that. He did time for assault charges, Heather Tipton told Fox 56. This is the other thing that I think is so disturbing, is that he really didn't technically do the time for the murder. It was really for the assault in the house of the other people he stabbed. So it's so surreal and disgusting that this is the point we've gotten to, where murderers seemingly have an easy out. Because realistically, I just don't understand what mentality you can be in as a judge or anyone in the courts to see that he's being let out and to not find any singular issue with that. And if you don't find an issue with it, I think you're in the wrong career path, because this is another tragedy waiting to happen. I don't know if he's going to go for the Tipton family again, if he's going to find another family, if it will be a completely different crime. But you do have to ask yourself how a former dialysis nurse allegedly lost their entire fucking shit and then went to kill a 6-year-old, stab everyone in the household, and then the courts were like, you know what, maybe we should show this person some leniency because what? They became a mental health advocate in prison? I'm sorry, maybe I'm scathing, maybe I'm too harsh, but like, what does that even mean, being a mental health advocate in prison? To say, hey, don't be like me, don't murder, I'm going to take an antidepressant, antipsychotic, and now I'm good? I'm sorry, that's just not the type of world I want to live in. I don't want to live in the type of world where we can just say we were insane and then it's all good, fine, whatever. I cannot emphasize enough, the precedent that this is putting out there makes it so that criminals will be a lot less scared of going to prison, mainly because maybe they won't even go to prison, but also because there's this ready-made excuse of the insanity plea, which once upon a time I think made a lot more sense than it does now, because now, based on this case and based on what we know about this case, it seems to be liberally attributed. Even if he weren't insane, this is a wild thing to do, to release him, okay? Even if he were the most stable person on planet Earth, there's no reason I can think of on planet Earth where I'm like, yes, let this guy out. Give him a second chance at life after ruining a family and traumatizing everyone. So that's where this case is at as of right now. I'm in disbelief that this is even where we're at, because it seems like such an obvious conversation that has such an obvious endpoint, and yet it's clearly not obvious, because if it were, then he would not be out of prison. I would not be sitting here telling you about it, and common sense would have won that day. But clearly, the time of common sense is nowhere to be found. So the good thing that's happening right now, to have a tiny, tiny glimmer of hope in infinitely dark times, is that the entire Kentucky parole board is facing mass calls to step down after releasing Ronald Exantis on good behavior after just 10 years for killing the 6-year-old Logan Tipton in 2015, with some even demanding charges against the board members. This is great news in my opinion, mainly because there is also a follow-up to this tweet. And the follow-up says, Kentucky parole board who released the black man Ronald Exantis who broke into a home, attacked a family, and murdered the 6-year-old son Logan Tipton. They must be held accountable. They let this monster loose on parole. He is free walking the streets. And here there are all the names of people on said parole board. And there's the phone number. Now, I'm not about harassing anyone, let me be very clear, but there's a phone number, and if you think they're making a horrible mistake, you can call that phone number and voice that in a civil manner. And I think that is one of the most useful things we can do without resorting to violence or anything of that nature. By the way, this came up because it's a top tweet. Upon looking at the name Ronald Exantis, looking that up on Twitter, these were the top tweets coming up. So that's where we're at as of now. Like I said, if you want to call and express your opinion in a civil manner, I think that's something that you can do if you want to do it. I do think that we do need to express these frustrations in a productive and safe way, but I really do think they need to be expressed, whether that's screaming on social media like I'm doing now or in other fashion. But it is important to show that these things are not going unnoticed, that these things are problems. Like it's important to have friction. There has to be some pushback, because the more we go in this direction, the more the concept of consequences just completely falls flat. As sad as it is to admit, a lot of criminals are deterred from crime because of the potential consequences, not because of moral problems, not because of qualms with their God being judgmental of their crimes. It's because you know what the prison time is, you know that there's a death penalty, whatever the case may be, right? The more we become lenient on the consequences of these crimes, the more we will just see crime spike, and we'll just see that there are no solutions to come to, and we will be living in a hellhole. Anyway, you guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.